The swinging doors of the Silver Dollar Saloon in Virginia City creaked open on a Saturday night in 1886, and every head turned because the man who walked in was Elias Garrett, 39 years old, 6'3" in his boots, and carrying the kind of quiet that makes loud men nervous. He wore dust the color of Montana summer on his coat and a colt on his hip that had never been drawn in anger, only in mercy, once for a horse with a broken leg and once for a friend who begged him not to let the fever take him slow. The faro table sat Lily Moreau, the judge's wife from Helena, in town to settle her late father's estate. She wore black silk and a veil, and eyes that had forgotten how to sleep. She had been losing steadily for 2 hours because the cards felt like the only thing left. She could still punish Elias, watched her from the bar nursing one whiskey. He would not finish when her last dollar clinked onto the green felt and the dealer swept it away with polite pity. She stood so fast the chair fell backward. The room went still. Lily walked straight to the bar, stood beside Elias, and said loud enough for every miner and gambler and painted lady to her eye, "Have nothing left, not money, not land, not even my good Namiso. Buy me a drink, cowboy or shoot, may no longer care which." Elias turned slow, looked down at her small gloved hands trembling on the scarred wood, and did the worst thing anyone in that saloon could imagine. He took off his hat, set it gentle on her head, like it belonged there all along, and said, "Mommy, reckon you've been shot at enough for one lifetime. Let me buy you supper instead." Drunk cowboy at the poker table laughed to loud hell. "Garrett's supper, that all you offering?" The lady Elias never raised his voice and never even looked away from Lily's soper. "Sayed into quiet place to lay your head in tomorrow. Morning coffee strong enough to wake the deadened. Every morning after that'n tall. You remember you're still a leviand?" Glad of it, the laughter died like a candle, and Windley stared up at him, the hat too big sliding over her eyes, tears cutting clean lines through the rice powder on her cheek suit. "Don't know mesh," whispered I. Amrundelius reached slow and lifted the veil back from her face. "I no grief when I see Eth Sadin. I know a woman who's been carrying it alone too long. I got a wagon outside in the ranch 2 days. Weston more quiet than any soul ought to have come with me, or stay and let these buzzards pick the rest of your bones. Your choice, ma'am, but I'm done watching good women bleed in saloons." Somebody started to object. Elias turned just enough that the lamplight caught the calm in his eyes and the promise in his shoulders, and the room remembered he was the man who once carried a wounded Shoshone girl 20 miles through a blizzard because her pony foundered and her father was drunk. Nobody spoke again. Lily looked at the cards still scattered on the table, looked at the empty glass in her hand, looked at the big quiet man holding his hat on her head like a perfect gentleman. She set the glass down. "Gentle, I need my valisesh," said voice shaking but steady. Elias smiled the slow smile that would one day gentle Martha's fears 40 years later already. "In the wagon, Mammy took the liberty when I saw you losing your tomorrow $1 at a time." Then Saloon watched stunned as the hardest man in Madison County held the door for a ruined woman in black silk, put her up on the wagon seat like she was made of morning lilac, a blanket around her, and drove out of Virginia City without looking back. They said later it was the most horrifying thing ever done in that saloon, worse than any gunfight, worse than any hanging. He gave her back her name, her morning sure, her 3 times a day, starting right there in front of God and every sinner in the territory. And when they rode past the last lantern, Lily leaned her head on his shoulder and cried the first clean tears she had cried since her little boy died of fever the winter before. Elias let her cry, drove slow so the ruts wouldn't jolt. Heron began the long habit of saving, murmuring with coffee on the tailgatenoon with jerky and silence beside a creek night with a fire that pushed the dark away until they reached the ranch under the cottonwood that wasn't planted yet. He never touched her. Wrong never asked for payment, and Lee gave her a room that smelled of lavender and peanut. Every morning left a blue enamel cup of coffee outside her Durantal. One dawn, she opened the door herself, took the cup from his hand, and stayed. That was the horrifying thing the rancher did in the saloon, that Neath loved her when she was unlovely believed in her when she had no faith. Left on refused to let the world finish what it started. Some said it was scandalsome, said Miracle Lily. Called it mercy and lived another 50 years on that ranch, planting the cottonwood herself the year Elias turned 50, raising 2 daughters, who never knew a day without gentle hands and teaching every broken soul who found the gate open that the worst thing a good man can, dois love. Yowslo Sorian forever whether the world understands or not asterisk. The cottonwood lily planted the year Elias turned 50 grew faster than either of them expected, asterisk, by the time their first daughter, Sarah, came screaming into the world in 1898. It already threw shade wide enough for a cradle on the porch, asterisk. By the time little Rose followed 2 years later, the tree was thick as a man's thigh and the roots had found the creek, asterisk. Lily never wore black again, asterisk. She wore calico, the color of sunrise, and later denim, the color of sky, asterisk. She learned to fork hay before breakfast and to bake bread that rose high and light. As hope, asterisk, she kept the blue enamel cup on a hook by the stove and every morning filled it for Elias first, then for herself, then for whichever child woke up crying. Elias grew gentler with every season. The colt stayed in its holster until it rusted. Shut, asterisk, he still rode the range, but now with a baby tied to his chest in a sling Lily had sewn from one of his old shirts. Asterisk, the hands swore. The boss sang lullabies to the cattle, and nobody dared laugh because the cattle put on weight like never seen. Before years turned quiet and golden, they buried Sarah's first pony under the cottonwood and planted wild roses on the grave. Asterisk, they watched Rose learn to read by lamplight, tracing letters with a finger still sticky from chokecherry jam, asterisk, they sat on the porch swing every evening, Elias with his boots off, Lily with her head on his shoulder, speaking soft about nothing and everything the way married people do when words are mostly habit and love is mostly presence. Asterisk, in 1918, the influenza came through the valley like a silent reaper, asterisk. It took the schoolteacher and the blacksmith's wife and old Mrs. Olson, who made the best lefts, asterisk. It came for Lily, too, burned her hot for 9 days and 9 nights. Elias never left the bedside. He bathed her face with water from the creek, fed her broth 1 spoon at a time, asterisk, told her stories about the saloon, the night he stole her from the cards and the whiskey and the dark, until her fever broke on the 10th morning and she opened her eyes clear and blue again. She was thin as a fence rail but alive, asterisk, and when she could sit up she took the blue enamel cup from his trembling hand and drank, asterisk, then handed it back. Your turn, she whispered. You look like you've been shot at and missed and shit at and hit, asterisk. Elias laughed until he cried into her hair, asterisk, the first and only time anyone ever heard him make that sound. They grew old the way good marriages do, slowly, gracefully, with hands that knew every scar on the other, asterisk. They celebrated 50 years under the cottonwood with a picnic and every neighbor for 40 miles, asterisk. Lily wore the same yellow dress she had worn the day Elias carried her over the threshold, asterisk. It no longer fit, but she wore it anyway, and nobody noticed because love makes everything fit perfect. In the spring of 1937, Elias woke one morning and could not rise. His heart simply said enough. He lay in the big bed and looked at Lily, still beautiful at 72, with silver braids and eyes that had never stopped thinking. Him save me 3 times a day, he said, voice soft as wind through cottonwood leaves, just like I saved you. Lily smiled. The smile that had gentled him in a saloon half a century earlier, asterisk. I never stopped, she answered, morning, noon, and night, asterisk, every day since you put your hat on my head and refused to let me die. She climbed into bed beside him, boots and all wrapped her arms around the man who had horrified a whole territory by loving her when she was ruined, asterisk, and held him while the sun climbed and the meadowlark sang and the cottonwood whispered the oldest love song there is, asterisk. When the doctor came at dusk, he found them tangled together like young lovers, asterisk. Elias gone quiet to whatever range waits beyond this one, asterisk. Lily still smiling, asterisk. Lily gone an hour later, refusing to let him ride alone. Asterisk, they buried them side by side under the tree Lily had planted. The roots curling gentle around them now, the way her arms once did, asterisk. Sarah and Rose laid the blue enamel cup between the graves, asterisk, filled it with coffee every morning for years, asterisk, until the girls grew up and moved away. And the ranch passed to a grandson, who never knew the story but kept the cup on the porch rail. Anyway, travelers still say if you ride past on a quiet evening, you can see two shapes on the porch swing. A tall man with his hat in his lap, asterisk, a small woman in yellow dress or a calico or denim leaning on his shoulder, the chains creaking, slow coffee steaming in the blue cup, and if you listen close, you'll hear her whisper, morning dose. Elias, or noon dose, or night dose, depending on the light, and you'll hear him answer every single time, I'm still here, darlin', save me again tomorrow, asterisk, because the worst thing that rancher ever did, asterisk, the thing worse than any gunfight or hanging or scandal the territory could imagine, was love a ruined woman back to life, then refuse to leave her, asterisk, not in a saloon, not in a marriage, not even in death 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, asterisk, forever.